Welcome to episode 59 of the GT on 5G. It's the latest inside scoop on everything 5G. We cover 6 topics in about 15 minutes, and it's brought to you by More Insights and Strategy. I'm Will Townsend, and joining me again this week is fellow analyst Anshel and Will. Let's get started. So my first topic this week is focused on Samsung networks. And so news broke that they are helping Korea Telecom deploy their first commercial standalone 5G network in South Korea. So what does this mean for new service delivery? You and I have talked about on prior podcasts, taking 5G core and 5G RAN and how that will truly unlock the potential of 5G from a latency and a throughput perspective. So it's no secret that South Korea has been a leader on the global stage with respect to 5G. And this is just another proof point behind where they are at in their deployments. And certainly with a commercial standalone 5G network, that is going to start unlocking, some of the most ballyhooed use cases, such as, autonomous driving, Industry 4.0, and, other applications. So did you catch this announcement, Anshel? And do you have any further insights?
Yeah, I think it's actually coming a little bit later than I was expecting. Mm-hmm. I was kind of expecting that KT would be having a commercial standalone 5G network sooner. But I'm not surprised that it's Samsung who's helping them do this. But overall, I think it's a positive move because, KT is one of the world's leading operators for leading edge technologies. So if they're adopting it and they're adopting it relatively soon, it means that many others are likely to follow thereafter.
Yeah, I mean, SK Telecom, one of their competitors has really been in the kind of the pole position with respect to deployment and new 5G service delivery. So I was sort of surprised when I saw this come across the wire that it wasn't SK Telecom, but KT. But I'm sure SK is not very far behind. So, but let's move to your first topic this week. And I did see that Verizon expanded their fixed wireless access footprint, and you want to talk about that.
Yeah, so what they are doing is they're expanding their 5G fixed wireless, which is pretty much millimeter wave at this point. They're calling ultra wideband, but realistically, that is going to also incorporate their midband as well, because that's just how they're marketing it. But what's interesting is they're doubling it from 24 cities, which is what they currently offer, to 42. I know that's not perfectly doubling it, but it's essentially doubling. And what's interesting is they're also offering up to a $1,500 credit to these businesses to terminate their contracts, and it's extending their price lock guarantee to 10 years, which is pretty good. And as somebody who is both parents used to own small businesses, a 10-year lock on a good price is good, because it guarantees, cost controls, because a lot of ISPs will give you promotional pricing and then start jacking up the prices because they know that you can't go anywhere. So I think this is a big deal, because a lot of small businesses basically have one or two choices, and usually the second choice is far behind the first choice. Which is very similar to what I think is happening in consumer. And I think that this is a big deal. It couldn't come sooner. I think 5G is going to impact businesses bigger than I think it will consumers, at least in the beginning.
I agree.
And I'm really happy to see Verizon kind of expanding this, and hopefully it'll continue to expand as their mid-band deployment grows as well.
Yeah, those are huge incentives. Now, I wonder, I didn't catch this news, so I'm not up to speed, but is there a contract commitment to get that $1,500 incentive and to get that 10-year price lock-in?
So I didn't look into that detail, but I can almost guarantee that there's a contract involved, simply because one, there's a 10-year price guarantee, and two, they're giving you money to leave another operator. And usually when you do that, you sign a contract.
Yeah, I would imagine it's probably at least 12 to 24 months, but no, it's super aggressive. So wow, that's pretty impressive on Verizon's part. Well, let's move to my second topic this week, and I took my second business trip of the year post-COVID to New York City. So AT&T invited me to attend a 5G event, and it was in the Chelsea area. And I think that borough is it must be a hotbed for operator, proof of concept labs, because I spent time with Verizon a few years ago at their alley, which is a sort of a co-working facility, but it also houses their 5G proof of concept lab, also in Chelsea. So I'm seeing a trend here. But I spend considerable time with AT&T, and you and I follow their 5G deployment. But it was interesting. So they had a more business focused panel in the morning, and then there were demo activities that followed. And Ashton Kutcher was one of the panelists. And if our viewers and subscribers aren't familiar with his focus on tech, he's very tech savvy, and so he's kind of parlayed his movie star career into investing in tech. He was an early investor in Uber, and he's very heavily invested, as he spoke on the panel, into areas like telemedicine and healthcare and that sort of thing. And I was actually quite impressed with his knowledge of 5G. I mean, he spoke to the Internet of Things and Edge, and I've attended other AT&T events, Shape, which in
I
prior
went to.
years, yeah, and you've been there as well, was hosted at the Warner Brothers studios. And when they would have these celebrities on these panels, you could tell that they weren't very deep in the tech, and they were sort of reading from a script. But I was very impressed with his knowledge. And then after that panel, I attended a series of demos, and the ones that I found most compelling, there were three. I've been pretty critical of Boingo internet, connectivity in airports in the past. But what was demoed at the event was Boingo's leverage of AT&T's millimeter wave deployment. And initially, the launch is in the Tampa airport. This is going to expand to about 25 airports nationwide in the U.S., and that will increase over time. But it's not it's not a slice of the network. It's leveraging the public network. So if you're an AT&T customer with a 5G plan, you'll be able to leverage this service immediately. And I expect also that AT&T will be leveraging this millimeter wave footprint in these airports for back office operations for the airports, as well as the airlines. So that is encouraging. Hopefully, we're going to see improved service with Boingo at airports moving forward. There's a second demo that I attended with Bookful, and they are an AR/VR platform that is focused on education of at the kind of the pre-K to elementary school grades. And it's basically taking books and using AR and VR to create an immersive experience on tablets and smartphones and those sorts of things. And I was actually quite impressed. And if you're an AT&T customer, they're offering a 6-month subscription to Bookful, similar to what AT&T recently announced with Google Stadia, and the online gaming platform, a 6-month free subscription. And there is actually some exclusive content with Bookful that only AT&T subscribers can access. And then finally, I've been somewhat critical, when we kind of flash to the past with the Time Warner acquisition and the recent spinoff of Warner Media, which I was less critical of, because I feel like it's going to give AT&T the ability to focus on its core competency of 5G and service delivery and that sort of thing. But I have been critical in the past of AT&T not quite fully leveraging the Warner Media assets. They showed a demo of integrating Warner Media assets like the new Space Jam movie into Facebook and Instagram for some enhanced sort of user experiences and filters and those sort of things. And so that was encouraging. I asked the person conducting the demo, were there any any opportunities, for further, enhancing, kind of experiences with Warner Media, and they said stay tuned. So all in all, it was just great to get out and actually be at an event in person, and it was great. So I know that you weren't able to attend, but do you have any additional thoughts or insights on what AT&T is up to?
Yeah, I think AT&T is actually seems like they're doing better with some of their Warner tie-ups now that it's no longer part of the company. Granted, these things do take time. So it's likely that what you're seeing today has been brewing for 6 to 12 months, if not longer. So it's it's always interesting to see how these things pan out. But I do think that Warner Media is a very powerful resource for AT&T, which they are still a significant owner of the new entity. And I think that they should treat it like a preferred partner when it comes to content. And I feel like sometimes when it's part of the company, it's actually less interesting to them because they own it. But when it's less owned, they can still partner with other companies as well. So I think it frees up AT&T a little bit in who they partner with and how. And I think because of that, there should be some focus on growing the media component of 5G, which I think was originally the purpose of why they bought Warner Media.
Sure.
And I think that AT&T's 5G network is kind of in the Goldilocks between Verizon and T-Mobile. They have both the coverage and they have the speeds, and they've always been, if not first, in second place almost every single time when it comes to coverage or bandwidth. So it's going to be very interesting to see how their network rolls out over the next 12 months. And I definitely think that we're going to see a lot more of these 5G events from operators trying to show off what they've got brewing.
No, I agree. And when you look at the U.S. market and the tier one carriers, I mean, this is a key differentiation area for AT&T to be able to leverage content, and not repurpose or bundle things like Netflix and that sort of thing. I mean, no critique on T-Mobile. They've been sort of expert in that area and providing additional subscriber entitlements and those forms, and to a lesser extent Verizon. But this is something that's a key differentiator for AT&T, at least on the consumer front. So I do think that we'll see more more tie-ups and more 5G experiences that result from it. So, but let's move to your second topic this week. And OpenSignal just published another report, and you want to talk about T-Mobile?
Yeah. So basically, every quarter we get updated numbers on coverage, speeds, reliability, and basically no shocker here. T-Mobile continued to retain its coverage and its bandwidth numbers. And the reason why OpenSignal is interesting because it uses real user data to measure these speeds and coverage, as opposed to say like a Root Metrics who's using actual testing equipment and is going out into the field, but there is a very specific methodology to it. So both are very valid, but they produce different results. And both can be skewed to whoever wants that data to work in their favor. So there is some possibility here and there. It's just benchmarking in that case. But what's interesting is basically T-Mobile's 2.5 gigahertz continues to roll out, and it's giving them the advantage on bandwidth, and it's giving them the advantage on coverage because they already have 600 megahertz rolled out, and they're still rolling that out as well. So T-Mobile took 5G availability, 5G reach, 5G download, and 5G upload. And then Verizon took 5G games experience and 5G voice app experience, while 5G video was tied between AT&T and Verizon. So what's interesting is if you look at 5G download speeds, T-Mobile's download speed was 87.5 megabits per second average, while AT&T and Verizon were both 52.3, which is a huge difference. And that's all 2.5 gigahertz. And then if you look at uploads, it's a little bit closer, but even then T-Mobile still beats Verizon. And I mean, in terms of availability, T-Mobile's got 36%, while AT&T's got 22 and Verizon's got 10. So it's really going to, I honestly think it's going to stay this way. And the gap will probably widen as we near the end of the year. But I think once we start 2022, we'll start to see Verizon and AT&T start to claw back some of the bandwidth numbers and some of the coverage as they start to roll out mid-band. I mean, I think we all knew this. Mid-band was the game changer. And I think if you think about it, the fact that T-Mobile closed the Sprint deal about a year late was still a big advantage for them. And I think if they had closed it even sooner, it would have been an even bigger gap in terms of what's possible versus today.
Yeah, I'm not surprised by this. I mean, let's also remember that, T-Mobile's been the first to standalone 5G deployment as well, but certainly their spectrum position, the layer cake that we've talked about in the past, has given them an advantage. And I agree with you, and I'm going to talk about Verizon in a moment and C-band and mid-band, but to your point, as AT&T and Verizon began to deploy their mid-band assets acquired from C-band primarily, that gap will begin to close, and certainly, they will deploy standalone as well. And so we will definitely keep tabs on that and have updates on future podcasts. But I want to go to my third and final topic this week. And this week, Ericsson signed an expanded multi-year agreement with Verizon, $8+ billion to help them. It's not only to help them build out their C-band assets, but it's also to help them build out their low band and their mmWave deployments as well. And so, but for me, I mean, critical question is, can Ericsson help accelerate, their mid-band deployment? Because you and I have talked about on prior podcasts that this is going to be a challenge for Verizon. C-band is, the spectrum range is in an area that requires, a lot of densification, and that is quite costly. But I also know that Ericsson has some considerable capabilities with respect to Cloud RAN, and I expect that Verizon will lean into that to speed sort of the agility and the deployment of their 5G network. So, do you have any insights here?
Yeah, I think the number was 8.3 billion.
Yeah, a little bit right.
It's interesting because I think Ericsson does have the most comprehensive portfolio of offerings. They might not always be the most competitive in every segment, but they do offer a lot of products. And I think that they are going to offer a lot to Verizon, especially since Verizon says they're going to be deploying their 5G massive MIMO for C-band and low band, and they're also going to be deploying mmWave. So they're taking the full solution from Ericsson, and then they're also taking it looks like spectrum sharing and Cloud RAN capabilities, which is part of the Ericsson radio system. So
yeah,
it seems like they're taking a lot of Ericsson's RAN capabilities, but there's still a lot more of the network to build out. And I have a feeling that, it's not going to be a blanket Ericsson network either.
Right.
So I think that this is step one. I don't think, was there a time frame for how much time this deal is for? It just says
multi-year. It's multi-year, so it wasn't specific.
Yeah, I have a feeling that there might be a re-up on this deal before the network is fully built out.
Right.
Because I think that 8.3 billion is probably not the complete amount that they're going to need to spend on their network to build it out.
Yeah, I'd agree, and this clearly highlights Ericsson's leadership in RAN, compared to their incumbent traditional competitors. And so, yeah, I like the fact that, Verizon's leaning into all of Ericsson's capabilities here. So we will keep our eyes and ears on this and report back in future podcasts as needed. But we're running a little longer than normal, but we've had a lot of great stuff to talk about. But your third and final topic this week, we're going to talk about Samsung Networks and what they're doing to enable AR and VR training for the federal government in the United States.
Yeah, so Samsung earlier this week announced that they are working with a defense contractor. I believe their name is GBL. And what they're doing is deploying these, they're called 5G test beds, basically. And what they're doing is they're bringing both millimeter wave and mid-band 5G to military bases. And what they're doing is they're helping the military understand how they can leverage 5G with the bandwidth and the capabilities that it has with AR and VR, and combining the two for training purposes. So they could possibly take out, one of these 5G test beds out into the field and maybe build this whole AR VR training simulator out in the field, where they can take advantage of advanced positioning technologies, high bandwidth, and being able to create these portable test beds. It sounds like initially these are going to be done in the labs first, and then they're going to move out into the field. That was the indication that I got from Samsung when I was briefed on this. And what's interesting is they're not just focusing on millimeter wave, but they're also doing mid-band, which I think is really important. And it will be standalone, and it's going to be using 5G end-to-end, which means we're not using like Wi-Fi or something like that. And it's going to be standalone as well, and it's going to be using Samsung Galaxy 5G devices. So I think it's really interesting how this is going to work out. But ultimately, this is a much more this feels much more commercial or pre-commercial, which is a big improvement, because I think we've had a lot of trials and tests and stuff like that, and this feels much more concrete. And what's interesting is this seems like it's focused on the Army specifically, but it's part of a larger $600 million 5G deal that's specifically focused for the DoD's wanting to leverage 5G technologies to improve itself.
Yeah, as I think about this, I mean, this is obviously that they state that it's for training purposes, but this could be a precursor to developing, a 5G in a box, or a cow, or a Colt, or whatever you want to call it, that can be deployed in a very remote military theater, and using AR and VR, overlays with communication devices to aid and war games and warfare in general. And so, yeah, it's quite interesting. It's quite interesting that Samsung Networks is involved. I mean, obviously South Korea is politically a favored nation with the United States. I'm sure the military, they're still driving, the whole Open RAN initiative to have, eventually, we may not see it in a 5G world, but, and certainly maybe in a 6G world, and more of the domestically sourced supply chain for these sorts of things. But yeah, it's quite fascinating when you start thinking about the applications of 5G in consumer, like we were talking with AT&T, and in the enterprise, as I mentioned, a few use cases, but then military applications as well. I mean, it could be quite a game changer there. But we ran a little long this week, but we had lots of great stuff to talk about. Another great podcast, but why don't you take us home?
Absolutely. We hope our viewers and listeners found this week's topics interesting. If anyone out there would like to provide us with insights on a specific 5G topic for a future podcast, please reach out to us on social media. Will is at WillTownTech, and I'm at Anshel. We hope you have a great weekend, and please tune in again next week.